All right, and we should be live. Hello, everybody. This is Secular Sekai with Tridents Against Tyrants. And, how have you all been doing? I am feeling better now, but had a mountain of stuff that landed on me last week to do, and then also started to get sick, and I'm still recovering, but uh, feeling a lot better now, so I can at least breathe and carry on conversations and took care of errands earlier. So, yeah, hopefully I'm good and my luck doesn't turn around. I don't end up coughing with every other word during this stream. But I see Ozzy Bugga, M35 Benvids, Michael Michaels, Mitch Ashdown, uh, who else? Anna, uh, Sir Garrick. If I missed anyone, my apologies. I think I said Michael Michaels already. Yeah, Michael Michaels. So yeah, welcome everybody. And as you can see, uh, this time we were able to help get some fundraising done for Brit. Uh, and from what I hear, worked out pretty well for him. So thank you everyone who supported that kind of impromptu fundraiser to support him in being able to get equipment to assist him in his role as a soldier. Thermal optics. And yeah, we Anton has made withdrawals, so as you can see, we're back down. Back down to where we always are after withdrawals. Right now we're at 1.92 hryvnia. So yeah, I'll be making a donation before the stream is over. And we're gonna have more fundraisers to come pretty soon. Been talking with a few people about additional things, about getting some support to help run the channel. And yeah, after this stream, another thing I was gonna do got canceled. So what I'll instead be doing, since I'm sick, is probably see if another friend of mine will help me right quick with recording a whole bunch of shorts that I want to start putting out. Gonna do a new series of them pretty soon that are pretty straightforward, but I'm gonna see if my editor wants to also add some additional flair to them. Experiment with that a little bit after I mass record a bunch of them for them to take a look at. All right. Anyway, we'll go ahead and jump into the news. So, but first, let me open up Q&A. Start Q&A. All right. Oh, that reminds me, I do have one other thing. There we go. All right. Now we'll get started. Let's see. Okay, so we got a couple pieces of news. We have some international news, so we're going to cover stuff happening in Ukraine. We're also going to cover stuff happening in the US, in various parts of Europe. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So, where's that toggle? There you are. All right. So, first piece of news from AP News. Oh, wait a second. Oh, interesting. As you all know, I had moved over to a new app, but because the old one apparently had some major issues. But now I'm not getting the same error message about that old plugin uh, in my browser. So, in fact, I thought it was quarantined automatically by Chrome. Hmm. Well, I already activated it, so I'll see about researching that more after the stream. Because at least with this one, it shows the majority of of the text instead of cutting it off for all of you. All right. So first piece of news is from AP News, and yeah, everybody's favorite orange spray tan wannabe fascist, Donald Trump, regarding the situation with Greenland. All right. So Trump's words on Greenland and borders ring alarms in Europe, but officials have a measured response. From Paris, AP News. President elect Donald Trump of the U.S. has tossed expansionist rhetoric at U.S. allies and potential adversaries with arguments that the frontiers of American power need to be extended into Canada and the Danish territory of Greenland, and southward to include the Panama Canal. Trump's suggestions that international borders can be redrawn, by force if necessary, are particularly inflammatory in Europe. His words run contrary to the argument European leaders and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky are trying to impress on Russian President Vladimir Putin. But many European leaders who have learned to expect the unexpected from Trump and have seen that actions don't always follow his words have been measured in their response, with some taking a nothing to see here view rather than vigorously defend European Union member Denmark. Analysts, though, say that even words can damage U.S. European relations ahead of Trump's second presidency. A diplomatic response in Europe. Several officials in Europe, where governments depend on U.S. trade, energy, investment, technology, and defense cooperation for security, emphasize their belief that Trump has no intention of marching troops into Greenland. I guess before we keep going, I gotta say I do agree with this, and I really do think that Donald Trump is just trying to distract the world from other issues, including the fact that he will not be able to deliver on many of his campaign promises. Outrage is a good way to distract people. It really, really is, sadly. However, the rhetoric alone is still concerning because Donald Trump, he's like a parrot. You know, he'll he'll say his own, outlandish things that just come out of the ether from his own mind. He'll speak without thinking first, but he'll also repeat things that are said to him from the people around. And the fact that this came up at all, the fact that he would talk about Greenland in any way, shape, or form, especially talk about economic coercion or military force, um, that's very concerning to me. So I don't want to dismiss it entirely. But let's keep reading on because, yeah, I have my own thoughts on this that I'll share toward the end of the article. I think we can exclude that the United States in the coming years will try to use force to annex territory that interests it, Italian Premier Giorgia Meloni said. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz pushed back but carefully, saying borders must not be moved by force and not mentioning Trump by name. This week, as Ukrainian President Zelensky pressed Trump's incoming administration to continue supporting Ukraine, he said, no matter what's going on in the world, everyone excuse me. Everyone wants to feel sure that their country will not just be erased off the map. Since Putin marched troops across Ukrainian borders in 2022, Zelensky and allies have been fighting at great cost to defend the principle that has underpinned the international order since World War II, that powerful nations can't simply gobble up others. The British and French foreign ministers have said they can't foresee a U.S. invasion of Greenland. Still, French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot portrayed Trump's remarks as a wake-up call. Do we think we're entering into a period that sees the return of the law of the strongest, the French minister said? Yes. On Friday, the Prime Minister of Greenland, a semi-autonomous Arctic territory that isn't part of the EU, but whose 56,000 residents are EU citizens as part of Denmark, said its people don't want to be Americans, but that he's open to greater cooperation with the US. So, this is partially what concerns me, this last part right here. Because anyone who's followed Greenlandic politics the last couple of years is probably aware of the fact that Greenland does have a rather vocal independence movement, wanting independence from Denmark, which I think a lot of people, a lot of countries around the world, even within Denmark itself, because Denmark pays a pretty penny, a fair amount of money each year in order to maintain Greenland and, well, yeah, maintain the quality of life, maintain various outposts and building infrastructure there on the island. And so it's a little concerning because, some people look at it like, oh, well, declaring independence ahead of time or something like that. That's, like one step away from then inviting someone else to annex you. Or, oh, but like Kosovo and Serbia. Well, you break away, but then end up extremely close with and possibly talking about joining with another country like Kosovo and Albania. However, the Greenland independence movement has existed long, long before the U.S. ever, even going back to the 1800s, was seeking to purchase the island. Really had a bigger resurgence in the 20th century, but it's been around. So, anyway, we'll finish up reading the article, but you can see why this would be concerning to some people, because there are parallels that could be drawn. And, obviously, many sane Americans would not want their country to use some underhanded means of convincing 56,000 people in Greenland, you know, to become a territory or a state. Because really, especially with the rhetoric that's already been announced, you couldn't expect an unbiased result. There's too much pressure already just from Trump's few statements on this matter. It's dangerous water to tread in, extremely dangerous. And obviously, in my opinion, it's a bit ridiculous. But let's keep going with the article. Cooperation is about dialogue, leader Mutebi Egede said. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen called the U.S. our closest ally and said, "We have to stand together." Analysts find Trump's words troubling. European security analysts agreed there's no real likelihood of Trump using the military against NATO ally Denmark, but nevertheless expressed profound disquiet. Analysts warned of turbulence ahead for transatlantic ties, international norms, and the NATO military alliance. Not least because of the growing row with member Canada over Trump's repeated suggestions that it become a U.S. state. There is a possibility, of course, that this is just a new a new sheriff in town, quote unquote, said Fleming Splidsboll Hansen, who specializes in foreign policy, Russia, and Greenland at the Danish Institute for International Studies. I take some comfort from the fact that he is now insisting that Canada should be included in the U.S., which suggests that it is just sort of political bravado. And that really is a big part of it. Donald Trump is not the kind of person who wants. He's not really a nationalist or you know, an imperialist or someone who wants to, like, quote unquote, make his country great or build up an American empire. He's a showman. He's a honestly pretty bad businessman and honestly a pretty successful con man. So that sums up pretty much my sentiment, my belief on this, although it still can't be dismissed. But damage has already been done. Exactly. And I really cannot remember a previous incident like this where an important ally, in this case the most important ally, would threaten Denmark or another NATO member state. Hansen said he fears NATO may be falling apart even before Trump's inauguration. I worry about our understanding of a collective West, he said. What does this even mean now? What may this mean just, say, 1 year from now, 2 years from now, or at least by the end of the second Trump presidency? What will be left? Security concerns as possible motivation. Some diplomats and analysts see a common thread in Trump's eyeing of Canada, the Panama Canal, and Greenland, securing resources and waterways to strengthen the U.S. against potential adversaries. Paris-based analyst Alex Frangul Alves said Trump's language is all part of his "Make America Great Again" quote-unquote mode. In Greenland soils, she noted, are rare earths critical for advanced and green technologies. China dominates global supplies of the valuable minerals, which the US, Europe, and other nations view as a security risk. Because it is. A lot of those. A lot of rare earth metals and other resources that are in plentiful supply in China, economically and in terms of long-term technological development, are viewed as a legitimate security risk for adversaries of the People's Republic of China, the EU, and the US. Honestly, probably even Russia. Russia and China pretend to be friends, but it's more of a frenemies situation. Any policy made in Washington is made through the lens of the competition with China, said Frangul Alves, who focuses on U.S. politics for the German Marshall Fund. Some observers said Trump's suggested methods are fraught with peril. Security analyst Alexander Kara said Trump's claim that we need Greenland for national security purposes reminded him of Putin's comments on Crimea when Russia seized the strategic Black Sea Peninsula from Ukraine in 2014. There's a cough. Suggesting that borders might be flexible is, quote, a completely dangerous precedent, said Kara, director of the Center for Defense Strategies in Kiev. We're in a time of transition from the old system based on norms and principles, he said, and heading to more conflicts, more chaos, and more uncertainty. So that's the end of the article. And basically, to sum up my thoughts on this, because this isn't the only article that's discussed this, and in Greenland last year, as well as I think only a week ago this year, there have been elements of the government in Greenland who have talked about pushing forward with independence from Denmark as a legitimate independent nation. And I think that if anything does end up coming from this in the future, meaning Denmark, even in Denmark, there have been calls for Greenland to become an independent nation. Of course, that's a hot topic of debate, I think, among some Danish. But, obviously not to become annexed by another country, not to just become a part of, like, the US, but to actually just be exactly that, an independent country that does trade with the US and the EU and kind of acts like a bridge between the two, like Iceland. And so, realistically, I think that a lot of this is just Trump doing political theater, bravado, kind of just trying to make himself seem strong, make himself seem like, I don't care if you're an enemy or a friend, I'm not going to take shit from anyone, we're going to do whatever we want because America, that kind of speech, But one thing that I do think may end up happening if there ends up being a change of status quo is if Greenland ever does become independent, and I just mean an independent country by itself, recognized by the United Nations as its own nation state, because they already have a flag, and it's already, if you go to your phone and you type in the word Greenland, there's probably a good chance that the Greenlandic flag will pop up, just like Puerto Rico. There are little things globally that kind of push certain territories in a direction where things are lined up to make it more streamlined economically and identity wise as an independent nation if it should if governance from another nation is relinquished. Um, and so if that were to happen, there's already a United States military base in Greenland, and there's already concerns from the US about China attempting to economically um, broker deals to have more influence and more of a presence in the Arctic through Greenland, especially if it became an independent nation. So I think what would be the most realistic thing is um, Donald Trump saying this to freak people out, then later on reeling back from it and saying, no, 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 the Greenlandic people just want independence and America is going to help with that. And then brokering some kind of trade deal and expanded military presence on Greenland itself. Kind of like a compact of association similar to the Marshall Islands or other countries that have close military strategic ties with the U.S. Now, am I certain that's what'll happen? No. I don't. No, nobody's certain what would happen. It might be that nothing happens. It might be that all this ends up just kind of being rhetoric, and then Greenland remains an overseas territory of Denmark, and this conversation gets shelved again for decades or even a century, because the U.S. has had these talks with Denmark and Greenland going all the way back to the 1800s. But my point with all of this is it is a major topic to keep an eye on. It's something that would affect not just the US, but also Europe, and by extension, of course, Ukraine, because Ukraine does strive to be a part of the EU and NATO. Ukraine is a part of Europe. And Ukraine has plenty of allies in Europe. And so this is a conversation about something that would be too important, have too much of an effect on both sides of the world, both sides of the Atlantic, to ignore it, because it could also indirectly have major uh, economic ripples that eventually affect Ukraine as well. More than just economic, but you get my point. So, anyway, that's the first piece of news. Let's move on to the next one. Actually, let's take a look at the chat right quick. Given that Trump is allowing the highest bidders to drill, Iceland needs to avoid Trump and his family. Greenland needs to avoid Trump and his family as much as possible. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if we're talking environmental issues, or we're talking, yeah. I mean, inevitably, sadly, I really do think that unfortunately, especially as the permafrost thaws, it might be the American government, it might be the Chinese government, it might be an independent Greenlandic government, or, worst of all, it could even be the Russian government if something crazy happens and Russia somehow got a foothold over there. But at some point, once it's more accessible, my point being that some government somewhere is going to start drilling and just drill, baby, drill. Because unfortunately, humans, especially living in modern industrialized nation states, tend to do a lot of things that are not good for the environment or for the people who live in an area in the name of national security through natural resource procurement, especially for technological means. So, yeah, not to be a downer, not to be a downer. I I want what's best for the people of Greenland, and that's not just economically. That's very important as well, but also politically. Um, you know, no one wants to see Greenland end up in a situation where they feel they have less political representation or where they've been coerced into staying with one nation or joining another nation. Usually, the best way to avoid that situation is when a nation state becomes independent, even if there's growing pains and economic issues that come with it. Problem there being, of course, that then when you're a brand new independent nation state, bills, to oversimplify things, bills still need to be paid. So then um, you end up with situations like this, discussions about who's going to have, which companies or corporations from what countries are going to have access to certain resources and governmental contracts for them, et cetera, et cetera. It's a, it's not a fun conversation to have, but yeah, we'll see with time. We'll see with time how it ends up turning out. Yeah, Trump's rhetoric is to divert attention over the court cases and records released from the DOJ. Yeah, I do think that's a big part of it as well. I think that's a big part of it in the short term, but in the long term, I think it's something that even if the Trump administration doesn't, some future administration in the US probably will end up revisiting. Hopefully, not one as insane as this incoming Trump administration. All right, next article. Another piece of international news from Europe this time. Now, this one, interesting story. I actually was completely confused when I saw this at first because I only saw a headline about it, I think, a few days ago. Oh, shoot, this one I did do in the new one. Okay, well, hold on. I have to reset it now. So this right here from France, I actually was confused when I first saw headlines about this death that occurred recently in France. So many of you have probably heard of the uh, far right politician Marine Le Pen. Oh, Darren asked, "Am I going on the shills Ukraine about Ukraine today?" I'm planning on it. Yeah, last week things got rescheduled, so it was on Sunday instead of Saturday, I think, and I just couldn't make that time. I had another important event I had to go to that only happens once a month, and but yeah, the schedule just didn't allow. This week, I probably will. I probably will go on to the shills. Because it's been a hot minute. There just keeps on ending up being things either on my end or on Dick's end that have made it so schedules haven't lined up. Um, so if they're streaming at the usual time today, I'll probably be going on to the shows. All right. Where was I? Okay. Let's keep going. Do we, Ronnie Vranken? Yo, yeah, yo, Ronnie. I don't think you were trying to be offensive, but But just just be aware, man, because you use certain words, you're gonna upset some people. Because I know you're typically a really good supporter around here, so just keep in mind. Okay, and Ronnie apologized. All right. I'm gonna get back to the news now. Where was I? Okay. Anyway, what I was saying is I got really confused because for those of you who know Marine Le Pen, she is a woman and a far right politician in France. Her father has a very similar name to her. So her father's name, let me go through this article, is Jean-Marie Le Pen. And so this article says French magazine deletes photo of Le Pen in tears after father's death following far right criticism. The deleted image shows Marine Le Pen crying as she learned of Jean-Marie Le Pen's death when she was on a plane back from cyclone devastated Mayotte, over the island and overseas territory of France, Mayotte, that has had major calls for independence and political unrest recently. So when I first saw this, because their names are so similar, I actually thought that it was Marine Le Pen who had died, and especially since Macron kind of just barely held on to the presidency this last go around, that would have been really huge news. So I remember a few days ago there were videos of people dancing in the streets. It was a yeah. I mean, I guess you could say it would be like the equivalent of in Germany the head of the AfD suddenly passing, or if Donald Trump in the United States suddenly passed away. You'd probably see pretty similar reactions from a lot of people, especially from the left side of the political spectrum. Um, but yeah, so anyway, until I revisited this topic today, I was confused. I thought that it was Marine Le Pen and not her father, Jean-Marie, who had passed. All right. A prominent French magazine, Paris Match, deleted a photo showing the moment a tearful Marine Le Pen learned of her father's death following criticism of the image from her far right party. The image showed Marine Le Pen in tears when news broke of Jean-Marie Le Pen's death on her return trip from the cyclone-ravaged French Indian Ocean territory of Mayotte. The 56-year-old took over party leadership from her father in 2011, from father to daughter, not nepotistic at all. Although, with Americans, it's not as though the two Bushes, who were not as far right as this family, but you get what I'm saying, political dynasties. Not a lot of room to talk there. And booted him out 4 years later, seeking to distance her movement from his racist, anti-Semitic, and Holocaust-denying remarks and his multiple convictions. He died on Tuesday at the age of 96. So yeah, again, I don't really trust Marine Le Pen. She also has her own reputation that is separate from her father. I really think this is mostly visuals, but yeah, seeking to distance her movement from his racist, anti-Semitic, and Holocaust-denying remarks. So yes, this is a man who was very contentious, to put it lightly, within French society. Paris Match's publication of a snapshot of Marine Le Pen the moment she learned of her father's death is an indignity beyond comparison, reacted party leader Jordan Bardella on X. Oh, and I think I put the link into the chat. If not, then I'll do so right now. This is from uh, Le Monde, lemonde.fr.france. The world. Reacted party leader Jordan Bardella on X. If dishonor had a name tonight, it would be Paris Mac, she added. Paris Match deleted the post on X and then withdrew the image from its online news article. The glossy magazine, known for its celebrity coverage, became part of the media empire of France's richest man, Bernard Arnault, in October 2024. After a stint under right-wing tycoon Vincent Bollor's ownership, the management of Paris Match didn't comment on the matter. In a further twist, Bardella himself later deleted his own post on X. Yeah, this is a short post. The RN's deputy leader, Louis Alliot, on Wednesday confirmed reports that Marine Le Pen had learned of the death of her father from reporters traveling with her back from Mayotte. We were on the plane in Nairobi, where we made a technical stopover, and it was in the Kenyan capital that journalists who were on the flight informed us of the death, he told TF1 television channel. So, why is this significant? Well, at first, I thought it was even more significant because I thought it was Marine Le Pen herself. But this is still, so this is someone who was in old age. He was more of a, I guess you could say, a legacy figure within the far right of France that had helped kind of build up a movement that his daughter now is the head of. So this doesn't really fully disrupt anything among that movement. So this is more of a matter of this is more of a matter of something that will probably create a bit more polarization within French society. France has been an important ally for multiple. I guess I know a lot of people might have their own opinions about the French government and valid criticisms. I have some valid criticisms about the French government myself. But whether it's it's been perhaps not as much as many of us would like, but there has been support to Ukraine from France in the past. There's been support to Armenia recently to try to balance that situation in case another Armenian-Azerbaijani war gets started sometime soon. I believe France has also been supportive of the opposition movement in Republic of Georgia. So what happens in France, it reverberates. France is an influential nation. In any case, yeah, only time will tell what comes next, but Marine Le Pen herself is only in her 50s. And to the best of my knowledge, there's no signs of sickness or anything that would remove her from a position of power. So it's still going to be a nail biter. It's still going to be a nail biter in the next French election. I can tell you that much. Keep an eye on this topic as well. All right, next. Ronnie Franken says she shoved him aside from the party. Okay. Interesting. Wouldn't surprise me too much because you do have kind of newer generations that are still influenced by very hateful, very openly bigoted far right generations before them, but still try to temper the rhetoric a little bit to make it more palatable for a lot of modern, um, you know, modern societies, such as what Marine Le Pen has been trying to do, I guess, to a certain extent in France, to basically push the same agenda and normalize policies, but without alienating too many voters, and slowly inch it more and more to the right, especially on matters of immigration, because that's a very hot topic, a very, very hot topic. And similar with the AfD in Germany, similar with the MAGA movement in the US, although the MAGA movement, I would say, is probably elements within it are definitely inflammatory enough to basically be calling for outright hate speech already. But anyway, I'm digressing. Let's move on to the next article. Oh, Spider Fate fella. Welcome. Glad you're here. All right, next piece of news from AP News. Once again, another piece of news from Slovakia, but a bit more directly related now to the situation, the war between Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine fighting to liberate itself from Russian occupation. Thousands rally across Slovakia to protest Prime Minister's pro-Russia policies. From Bratislava, Slovakia, AP News. Thousands of Slovaks took to the streets on Friday as protests against the pro-Russia policies of populist Prime Minister Robert Fico spread from Slovakia's capital to towns and cities across the country and abroad. The latest wave of anti-government rallies was fueled by Fico's unexpected trip to Moscow before Christmas to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. So we've talked about Fico a lot here on the channel. Same thing with Orban. Orban, it's really interesting because I think that there are people who would describe Orban as more autocratic, far right leaning, and there are those who would describe Fico perhaps as more authoritarian, far left leaning, or at least his party. But either way, when it comes to social policies, they're both highly traditional, highly conservative. Forget the association of conservative being with the right and liberal being with the left. Just you can be, communist China is highly socially conservative. The Soviet Union was highly socially conservative. You go far enough in either direction on the political spectrum, eventually people start sharpening pitchforks and looking for people to turn into a scapegoat, basically, or to purge in one way or another. And so, yeah, let's keep reading. Fico's meeting with Putin is, quote, unacceptable, protest organizer Lucia Staselova from the Peace to Ukraine's non-governmental organization told the crowd in Bratislava. I'll have to look them up also. Peace to Ukraine. I wonder, it's an NGO, so I wonder if they're fully just, I wonder if they're peacenik and they're, for lack of a better word, like end the war by any means, peacenik, just willing to kowtow to authoritarianism, or if they actually push for support, like military support, strongly standing behind Ukraine. I'll have to look into that. I actually don't know. There's only one pro-Ukrainian Slovakian organization I had looked into a while back, and it's been a while since I checked in on them, so that gives me a little bit of homework to do later. Staselova said that Fico went to Moscow at a time when our neighbors face a huge military aggression, at a time when the whole civilized and democratic world condemns this aggression. We're ashamed of Fico, the crowd chanted. Fico said that his trip, a rare visit to the Kremlin by a European Union leader since Moscow's all-out invasion of Ukraine began on February 24th, 2022, was a reaction to Ukraine's move to halt Russian gas supplies to European customers through its pipeline network after a pre-war transit deal expired at the end of 2024. Ah, I see. So, basically just this is affecting Slovakia more now. So this can be an excuse to go speak with the imperialist in the Kremlin to beg for gas, basically, from the person that Fico seems to assume will be in charge or have control of this situation in the end. It's a bad look. Obviously. I don't even have to say that. All right. Slovakia has no shortage of gas supplies and can receive it through other EU countries, the government said, but Fico said that his country would lose around 500 million euros or 515 million US dollars a year in transit fees. So it's not cheap enough. It's not cheap enough. It's too expensive. Yeah, which, okay, so the Slovakian government is not flush with cash compared to other European Union nation state members. Um, but obviously, you have plenty of Slovaks who really don't care about that, given, the implication of instead doing business with someone who's literally murdering your next door neighbors. It would kind of be like, let me think of a fictional example. Like, okay, imagine if Mexico and Guatemala, actually, no, let's say Guatemala and Belize, because that's actually more of a real world example. Because for anyone who doesn't know anything about Central and South American politics, Guatemala really wants to invade Belize. Let's say in a fictional world, Guatemala invaded Belize and was a much richer, much more powerful country, and they could get away with it and feel brazen enough to do it without, too many consequences, etc. And then all of a sudden, some resource deal with neighboring countries uh, like I don't know, not Mexico because they're bigger, but let's say El Salvador or Honduras suddenly decided instead of sanctioning, they were going to start buying oil or start buying some other resource from Guatemala, all the while, you know, citizens of Belize being bombed to hell by them. Again, this is a fictional example, so I hope nobody from any of these countries is gonna get pissed. Okay. But yeah, of course there would be outrage. Of course it would be ridiculous, especially if it were an invasion to take land. Um, which, yeah, if Guatemala ever did invade Belize, which they probably won't, for many, many reasons, it would be because of that. Because Guatemala claims part of Belize, just like how Venezuela claims part of Guyana. I should have just used the Venezuela example. I would have risked pissing off less people. Ow. Anyway, you get my point. Um, it's just absolutely ridiculous. Um, all right. He could threaten to end sending electricity supplies to Ukraine, reduce support for Ukrainian refugees, halt humanitarian aid, and block EU financial aid to Ukraine in retaliation. The crowd condemned Fico's plan. Fico acts as an agent of a foreign power, former Foreign Minister Ratislav Kacer said. The rallies also took place in more than a dozen places, including locations in Slovakia, Czech capital Prague, and Krakow, Poland, organizers said. They said that their protest would continue. This. I'm going to highlight this right now. If you are European and you're listening right now, if you know someone who's European, like save this exact moment in the stream and share it with them. This right here, in a dozen places, more than a dozen, various locations, including Slovakia. I'm assuming probably in the capital as well. In the Czech capital of Prague, Slovakia and Czechia, Czech Republic, both have very close history with one another, and Krakow, Poland. Poland as well. These three countries, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland, seeing them all come together, seeing citizens from all these places come together in support of Ukraine, protesting in support of Ukraine, protesting against Fico. Guys, this is, from a civilian standpoint, from something that someone who lives in Europe could get involved in, especially this part of Europe, these countries. This is huge. Slovakia is not lost yet. Bulgaria, another good example, is not lost yet. Romania almost had a pro-Russian president, and then, of course, we all saw what happened with that election being annulled because of foreign interference being cited, which is a dangerous thing to do. It really is, but it's still they still did it. So Romania's in more of a teetering position now, and by extension, Moldova as well. But Romania has not flipped or fall into far right or far left extremist, more conciliatory pro-Russian elements yet. We need to keep that. We need to keep that situation. Because Hungary is probably not going to change anytime soon. But Slovakia can hold the line. We don't need more Hungaries popping up. We don't need more Orbáns. We don't need a spread through various economic and political means of this concept of a quote-unquote illiberal democracy that Orbán's Fidesz party has pushed for, has implemented in Hungary, and likely would hope to see emulated in other parts of Europe as well. So, anyway, let's close out this article. Fico's views on Russia have sharply differed from the European mainstream. Oh, okay, well, hold on. Okay, well, the last part's cut off, but I'll just read it. He returned to power last year after his leftist party, Smer Direction, won a parliamentary election on a pro-Russia and anti-American platform. Since then, he has ended Slovakia's military aid for Ukraine, lashed out at EU sanctions on Russia, and vowed to block Ukraine from joining NATO. So again, Slovakia is not lost, but Slovakia is in the weeds. And if Slovaks aren't careful, they'll end up with a government just like Hungary. And that basically it'll basically mean de facto one-party rule or one-party majority influence, no real ability for grassroots political change to take place without major protests, kind of like the likes of which we've seen in Republic of Georgia recently, or bigger. Yeah. Anyway, good on these protesters for standing with Ukraine. My respect to them. All right, next article, which is directly about Ukraine and the battlefield. So if you've been waiting for that, my apologies. We're jumping into it now. This one is the actual title of our video today. But first, let me just check and see if we have any questions yet. Ozzy Bugga says the UK protects Belize. That's true, exactly. Yeah. It was just a fictional example. Because I wanted to make some kind of analogy that would likely be understood without pissing people off. One question so far from Michael Michaels. Oh, he asks, did you say you have a cold or flu? Get well soon, keep sipping water. I have no idea. Probably a flu, because it's been persisting for quite a while. Well, at least a couple of days. I was helping out at a homeless shelter because it's very cold in many places right now, and where I happen to be, there are a lot of people who've been out on the street who basically we're gonna die out under many inches of snow. So I went to help out. They really needed people for a night shift from like midnight until 8 a.m. And I did that on the same days that I had my job, so I didn't really get any sleep. So I got exposed to something that made me sick, and then I got no sleep, and then on top of that I had to work, and it all just kind of piled up. So I kind of just overdid it in the last week. But thankfully the weather should improve soon, so hopefully their volunteer presence has been enough to take care of stuff. Anyway, thanks for asking. Appreciate it. Kanti. Hey, Kanti. Good to see you, man. Fico is pronounced fecal, correct? Yeah, you know what? Maybe that's the pronunciation I should use from now on. You read my mind. That's actually what I was thinking earlier when I was reading his name, which I'm certain I'm mispronouncing, but I don't respect the man enough to actually pronounce his name with the way that one would in the Slovak language, in Slovakian. Slovakia. Oh, Ronnie. Yeah, pin. Yeah, Ronnie has a good point. Slovakians fundraised millions for Ukraine. No government was involved because Fico was already ruling. Yep. No, exactly. Slovakia is interesting, and so is Bulgaria, because Bulgaria has a fair number of people who support Ukraine, and the official government stance is supportive of Ukraine, but it also has a lot of people who who don't, or who have a positive view of Russia. Whereas in Slovakia, I would say there are probably more people who are supportive of Ukraine, but then with guys like Fico and his party, you see a very obvious pro-Russia, anti-Ukraine sentiment. So it's kind of flipped. Like in Bulgaria, you've got this bulwark of a I haven't seen the exact numbers, but either like a 50-50 split, or maybe slightly less than half the population that supports Ukraine. And so the government, just the way the politics work there has happened to remain pro-Ukrainian, even even with a lot of anti-Ukraine uh, angry rhetoric from some in Bulgarian society. Whereas in Slovakia, I really do think that there's a large number of people. I think more than half of Slovak society is either neutral or supportive of Ukraine rather than pro-Russian, or anti-Ukrainian, or any of that. um, but it's the opposite problem. You've got these elements in the government who aren't really representing that majority of people. I could be completely wrong, though. I could be completely wrong on both counts because I don't have any statistics in front of me. That's just kind of the gist of what I've seen from a few articles I read way back. So, regardless of the total numbers, there has been support for Ukraine from both of these countries. Bulgaria is one example, Slovakia is another example. But in Slovakia, instead of governmental support, it's primarily been from everyday citizens, which which I respect a lot because I'm an everyday citizen who doesn't have millions or billions of dollars, or the ability to direct an entire company or multiple companies toward, helping to bolster the Ukrainian economy, or set up deals strengthening a Ukrainian and general European military industrial complex. I kind of wish that I did, but I think a lot of us probably kind of wish that we could set something up like that. So we do the best with what we've got. um. Oh, hey, Canty, you're also sick. Feel better, man. Bulgaria has a history of seeing Russia as a protector from Turkey. Yeah, yeah, you're right. That's true. That's true. Plus, Bulgarian is easy for a Russian to learn, as Bulgarian is the basis for the Slavic Cyrillic Bible. Yeah, yeah, actually, yeah, Bulgarian and Russian do both use the Cyrillic alphabet. I believe you're correct about that. So yeah, in the case of Bulgaria, the history is more complex because Czechoslovakia was invaded at one point by the Soviet Union, just like Hungary, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly. Bulgaria, um, going back a long time ago, uh, yeah, basically was kept from being invaded, or it was protected by Russia from the Ottomans, if I'm not mistaken. So you're right, there is that connection. Um, it's been a hot minute. I really do need to review my Bulgarian history. I'm a history nerd, so I mean, whether it's Armenia or Bhutan or Bulgaria or Kosovo or Ukraine or Russia or the United States or Yemen, like if I ever find myself like having to like rack my memory to remember stuff about different countries, the first thing that I want to do is go read a shit ton of books and articles about that country. It's like every couple of months I end up like, which one do I need a refresher on today? All right. Anyway, back to the article. So instead of getting distracted. Oh well, we finished that article. In any case, next article. Since I don't think we have any more questions right now. Next article. Ukraine says it captured 2 North Korean soldiers fighting for Russia. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe these are the first North Korean troops officially to be announced as being captured as prisoners of war, POWs. So let's see. From Kyiv, Ukraine, AP News, Ukraine says it captured 2 North Korean soldiers fighting for Russia. Ukraine's forces have captured 2 North Korean soldiers fighting alongside Russian forces in Russia's Kursk border region, President Volodymyr Zelensky said Saturday, the first such claim by Kyiv since North Korea sent thousands of troops to shore up Moscow's war effort on the other side of the world. Zelensky made the comments days after Ukraine, facing a slow Russian onslaught in the east, began pressing new attacks in Kursk to retain ground captured in a lightning incursion in August. Hold on a sec. I didn't get a plus plus earlier. But I show volume. Somebody give me a plus plus. I feel like someone would have already let me know by now if I was quiet for an hour and 2 minutes. But apparently my audio might not have been working at some point during the stream. Can all of you hear me right now? Yeah, no, I'm not crazy because I know because people have been responding to the things I've been saying in chat. So, okay, right now I am audible. Good, good. All right, let's keep going with the article. Okay, to retain ground capture. Okay, the first occupation of Russian territory since World War II. Moscow's counterattack has left Ukrainian forces outstretched and demoralized, killing and wounding thousands and retaking more than 40% of the 984 square kilometers, 380 square miles of Kursk Ukraine had seized. Our soldiers have captured North Korean soldiers in Kursk. These are 2 soldiers who, although wounded, survived, were taken to Kyiv, and are communicating with Ukrainian security services, Zelensky said in a post on the Telegram messaging app. He shared photos of 2 men resting on cots in a room with bars over the windows. Both wore bandages, one around his jaw, and the other around both hands and wrists. Zelensky said capturing the soldiers alive was, quote, not easy. He asserted that Russian and North Korean forces fighting in Kursk have tried to conceal the presence of North Korean soldiers, including by killing wounded comrades on the battlefield to avoid their capture and interrogation by Kyiv. Oh, there we go. Ukraine's security service SBU on Saturday said one of the soldiers had no documents at all, while the other had been carrying a Russian military ID card in the name of a man from Tuva, a Russian region bordering Mongolia. Reminder to people that there is a movement of citizens in Tuva pushing for independence from Russia. For those who want to learn more, look up the organization, the Forum of I think it's Free Nations of Post-Russia, and they have a channel on YouTube and a website. And you'll find multiple groups, many of them small in size, some of them a little bit larger, that are not very fond of the government of Moscovia occupying their lands. According to the SBU, one of the soldiers claimed he had been told he was going to Russia for training rather than to fight against Ukraine. He said his combat unit, made up of North Koreans, only received 1 week of training alongside Russian troops before being sent to the front. A senior Ukrainian military official said last month that a couple hundred North Korean troops fighting alongside Russian forces in Kursk have been killed or wounded in battle. Ukraine estimates that 10,000 to 12,000 North Korean troops have been sent to Russia. The White House and Pentagon said the North Korean forces have been battling on the front lines in largely infantry positions. They have been fighting with Russian units and, in some cases, independently around Kursk. Interesting. Okay. Its full-scale invasion 3 years ago left Russia holding a fifth of Ukraine, and Zelensky has hinted that he hopes controlling Kursk will help force Moscow to negotiate an end to the war. But multiple Ukrainian and Western officials in Kiev last month told the Associated Press that they fear gambling on Kursk will weaken the whole 1,000-kilometer or 621-mile front line, and Ukraine is losing precious ground in the east. Also, I think I've said this before in previous streams, but in case I haven't, I'm going to say it now. The whole situation with having North Korean troops fighting in Kursk on Russian, what Russia recognizes as, Russian soil, what internationally is recognized as Russian soil, but of course, if Russia wants Kursk back, it should get the hell out of all of internationally recognized Ukraine, including Crimea. It creates a really it creates a big opportunity for propaganda messaging for both Russia and North Korea, where if North Korea goes to war in the future on the Korean Peninsula with South Korea, it gives basically kind of an IOU status, where North Korea could call on Russia to provide troops, even if China would not do so. Because perhaps China would not want to be directly involved in any conflict and instead would prefer to be seen as a quote-unquote peacemaker. So it does that, but also, I don't know if they hate each other or they're neutral about each other, or some of them even try to get along and become like friends or comrades in arms, but it creates a propaganda messaging to say that Russia and North Korean troops, soldiers have fought and bled and died together, and try to rekindle those ties, rekindle the military ties that they had from the old Soviet era, before the fall of the Soviet Union. So, yeah, I think that eventually North Korea's endgame is to pull Russia into a war on the Korean Peninsula, which Russia probably would have been reluctant to do before this. Anyway, only time will tell if that ends up being a correct analysis or not. Zelensky welcomes new U.S. sanctions against Russia. Zelensky spoke to U.S. President Joe Biden following the announcement of a new U.S. sanctions package on Russia's critically important energy sector, according to Zelensky's Telegram account. The sanctions target more than 180 oil-carrying vessels that are suspected to be part of a shadow fleet utilized by the Kremlin to evade oil sanctions, as well as Russian energy majors, traders, oil field service firms, and energy officials. Several of the vessels targeted are also suspected of shipping sanctioned Iranian oil, according to the Treasury Department. It is very important that America has now struck at Russia's shadow tanker fleet and at companies such as Gazprom Neft and Surhut Neftegaz. Surhut Neftegaz. I'm probably saying that wrong, but close enough. Which accumulate money for Russian President Vladimir Putin personally. He must feel the price of his war losing from his wallets, Zelensky said, referencing two Russian energy giants blacklisted along with dozens of subsidiaries. In response to the sanctions, the Russian Foreign Ministry said that Washington's hostile actions will not go unanswered, but did not provide details of any planned countermeasures. High number of Ukrainian drones hints at improved arms industry. Here is the real good news, guys. Every time I hear about this, it makes me happy. Okay, I'm not I'm not even Ukrainian. You know, I'm a strong supporter of Ukraine. But like this, like just as a supporter of Ukraine, this makes me feel patriotic for a country that isn't even officially my own. Like this is really important. This is great news, and it's good news for the future for a country that really, really needs it. Uh, and I hope that it continues to develop at a good, strong, effective clip, a rapid clip, uh, and becomes a pride and joy for Ukrainian people, similar to arms industries in countries like France, the UK, Germany, um, Poland, more and more now. Poland has a strong defense industry that I would say Poles can be pretty proud of. So let's read on. Meanwhile, in Russia, Ukrainian drones overnight slammed into apartment blocks in western Tambov province, blowing out windows and damaging balconies in two five-story blocks. Acting regional governor Evgeny Bervishov said there were injuries, he said, without giving details. Uh, hmm. The tone of this content, I guess the last paragraph does mention it more, but the title seems more optimistic than the actual content of this final portion of the article. Um, Russia shot down 85 Ukrainian drones, mostly targeting the south and west, the defense ministry reported Saturday. At the same time, Russia attacked its neighbor with 74 drones overnight into Saturday, according to Ukraine's Air Force. The relatively high number of Ukrainian drones, as cited by Russian officials, appeared to hint at Kiev's efforts to ramp up domestic weapons production with the likely goal of inflicting damage comparable to that wrought by Moscow. Yeah, because if Moscovia thinks that they can get away with what they're doing to Ukraine, they're sorely mistaken. And when it gets to the point where Moscow itself is bombarded the same way that Kiev is, and no tactical nuke ever gets dropped, well, at that point, the world sees that Russia is a paper tiger when it comes to that threat. You know, probably the only time they would launch a nuclear missile would be a full ICBM, you know, world-ending extinction event scenario. It seems more and more that Russia would not actually use a tactical nuke. Now, of course, you should never discount anything, but we have to go based off of the laws of probability, and yeah, I call their bluff. If it's a game of poker, and it's not a game, it's real people's lives, but if the tactics, the strategy are similar to that of poker, then the Russian bluff is their tell is damn near impossible to see, to not see. It's very obvious, at least in my opinion. All right, and finally, to go along with this, I have a website here I want to share. I think I already put the link into the chat, but in case I didn't, I'm putting it again. Related to this article about North Korean troops captured, this is something interesting I wanted to share. This is the Ministry of Education, english.moe.go.kr. So this is an initiative of the, Korean Ministry of Education. And they misspelled this. If anyone happens to know someone in South Korea to reach out to and correct them on this, please do so. Because I get it. They're probably basing it off of the old Latinization prior to this war. But that should definitely be corrected to Kiev, not Kiev. There is a difference. But nonetheless, this is an initiative between the two governments of South Korea and Ukraine. Oh, and they would explain why it's probably this. So this was back in 2017. So that might also explain why the spelling hasn't been updated. But this is still operational to the best of my knowledge, in Kyiv. The Ministry of Education opened a Korean Education Center, hereinafter referred to as the Education Center, on March 17th, Friday, in Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, and signed an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, to promote Korean language education. I have not personally known, but I have known volunteers and soldiers who have known Ukrainian soldiers specifically trained in the Korean language. In fact, back in 2022, or maybe it was 2023, but I actually remember there being a post about a soldier who unfortunately passed in the line of duty, who was an expert, who was fluent in the Korean language. This institute has produced effective communicators, translators, and leaders. There has been plenty of communication, I can tell you that much, from people I've spoken to, between South Koreans and Ukrainians, civilians and soldiers alike, and initiatives to support Ukrainian troops from South Koreans. And I really hope that this continues to expand, that there's more enrollment, that there are more who become, that the two countries become closer and more Ukrainians become well versed in Korean language, culture, and the needs of both countries, especially in terms of defense. So, Giriel, Ian, about 30,000 people in the Korean community have requested to establish the establishment of an education center, and the Ministry of Education opened the education center to strengthen the education of Koreans and the bond of overseas Koreans. I'm going to give grammar and spelling passes to this page, even though it's an official government website, because English is not the first language of either of these countries. All right, I'm just gonna put that out there. Ukraine is located at the center of Eastern Europe, bridging Europe and Asia, and thus the Education Center will play an important role in actively promoting the status of Korean education in the world. Plenty of more information. Here we go. In line with the growing demand for overseas Korean education and international education, the Atlantic Korean Education Center will open April of this year, 2017. In addition, 41 education centers will be established across 18 countries. So, that explains it. This is an unofficial translation, I guess. Okay. All right. Well, in any case, I just kind of wanted to highlight this because, yeah, it's more and more important to highlight these ties between the two countries now that North Korea is firmly fighting with Russia alongside Russians and probably expecting the same in return in the future. South Korea needs ties with the US, yes, absolutely, and already does have those. It needs additional ties. Honestly, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So if there has been reluctance in South Korean society to be more involved directly in some way, shape, or form with Ukraine, then I can't speak for the people of South Korea, but my opinion is that someone should ideally stand up and push for those ties to be established, because Ukraine is an impressive force militarily and will have a lot to offer, especially with cooperation alongside allies in the post-war period after this current war. It's beneficial to South Korea. It's definitely beneficial to Ukraine, of course. And one more thing, South Korean troops are not South Korean troops, although they are allied with the United States and are sometimes kind of considered like a close strategic partner of NATO, it's not officially a part of NATO. It's not in Europe. A more emboldened South Korea, directly involved with countering its adversary to the north globally, not just by covert means, but by more overt means, I think would be extremely beneficial to their country in the long term. Remaining on the defensive forever doesn't actually work, and as long as Russia exists and China exists, there's always going to be someone to prop up Pyongyang, North Korea, especially since they also have their nuclear weapons program that they're putting together. So, you know, South Korean society, in my opinion, would benefit from, at the very least, having some logistics and training officers in large numbers assisting Ukraine, so they could also ask for the same kind of support in the war that likely is inevitable to come in the future between the North and South. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents. All right. All right, we're an hour and 20 minutes in. We're going to keep going for a while. Let's see. What's this? Vitaly Kim of Mykolaiv is of Goryeo, Korean descent. They were deported from far away and scattered across the USSR so as not to be a minority on the Korean border region. Right. Yeah. What's interesting is that happened back in the day with the USSR. That's a good comment. I'm gonna pin it. Ozzy Bugga has a good point there. What's interesting is that happened with the USSR because that was kind of their MO, their modus operandi, to constantly be exiling and deporting and relocating, often by force, populations within the former Soviet Union, which is part of the reason why borders and tensions between different ethnic groups have kind of were kind of created in the post-Soviet era between ex-Soviet nations and some of the people that exist in those nations alongside one another. But that never, to the best of my knowledge, that didn't ever happen with the People's Republic of China. And there actually is an ethnically Korean Chinese citizen population there on the border with North Korea. And I believe, what's the term for it, for that group? The Shaoxiangzhu, Shaoxianzu, ethnic Koreans with Chinese nationality or citizenship are termed Korean Chinese, Joseongjok, Chosongjok, or Shaoxianzu. And yeah, it's fascinating because they were never really forcibly like dispersed or relocated somewhere else. And I think that's partially because doing that so often and to so many people was more of a unique practice of the Russian Empire and then the Soviet Union, because of just how frickin' vast the amount of land both of those entities, including even the modern Russian Federation, controlled just because it's so much land. There are so many places that are not really inhabited by anyone. There's places where people could be moved to, basically, even if they were harsh places. Yeah, anyway, interesting piece of history. Also something that, given recent developments, I bet you North Korea has probably been salty about in the past, but would overlook because of an alliance with Russia. Might be something to remind South Korea about, though. All right, let's see, what else? Oh, Ronnie says we can hear you breathe heavily. Yeah. Sorry, guys. I like I said, I'm sick. Um, so I'm just trying not to cough while on stream. Hopefully, hopefully I'll be back to 100% before too long. But yeah, sorry. Might have to put up with a little bit of sniffling and heavy breathing for this stream. Another question from Kellen Dunn. There are discussions between US and Ukraine to license production of Patriot interceptors in Ukraine. Any updates on this? Why did Biden wait so damn long? It's infuriating. You know, it is infuriating. The whole thing, the whole way that this war has been handled has been infuriating, and I mean, I try not to do too much blind speculation since I don't have a direct line to the United States DoD or top brass in the military or the Pentagon or the CIA and other intelligence agencies, any of that. Um, I think that part of it is that the United States recognizes how important this war is, and for Ukraine to survive politically as a nation state and to push back against Russia. I think that I think that part of it is just bureaucracy and the naturally slow process by which a lot of this happens, especially for anything that is produced that has a contract with the U.S. government and military itself, but is actually like like the specifics of certain things might be proprietary or might be unique to particular companies that they do business with, domestic U.S. companies. Um, and so licensing the production of the Patriots interceptors in Ukraine, it takes a long time to sign off on paperwork for stuff like that. It took forever to get any F-16s actually over there to Ukraine. It takes forever to, deliver Patriots, let alone certify their production uh, inside Ukraine. And it really just comes down to the bureaucratic wheels of national security, because these are things that are very. Some of them are older, some of them are, newer pieces of military tech, but they're still pieces of tech that are considered extremely important. There's a lot of steps to be able to be cleared to be able to have them, let alone to be given the knowledge, logistics, and support if needed to produce them. Um, I think that I don't think there's a huge conspiracy or anything involved with it. I think it really just is the frustratingly slow nature of convincing people to provide that kind of licensing and authorization to a foreign nation state, to people from a foreign nation, on the part of just about any government. And um, the U.S. tends to be very touchy about handing out any of its equipment and details about them to other nations. Um, Even if some of it's already been copied and basically is available because it was successfully copied or information stolen or units intercepted and then reverse engineered several years back. It's yeah. I couldn't tell you exactly why it's taken so long, but the fact that it's finally being allowed, supposedly finally happening, that's really good news. Now the big issue is making sure that the Patriot as making sure that Ukraine has the economic means to be able to produce them and to protect any facilities that would be producing them on their own territory from Russian bombardment, from targeting by the Russian military, since both sides are still bombarding one another? Very good question. Which I should have selected. There it is. All right, next. One sec. Being sick sucks. All right, next. Let's see. Let's take a look at there's still a competition ongoing protests, and two competing presidencies within the Republic of Georgia. There's now a Georgian Dream appointed president, as well as the previous president, who still has supporters who recognize her as the only legitimate president of the Republic of Georgia. So that's a piece of news that's ongoing. I'm not really going to jump into an article about it, but don't forget that the Republic of Georgia still is fighting their own political fight, and I really hope that Salome Zorabichvili is able to successfully push against the Georgian Dream government without ending up dead or imprisoned or forced into exile outside of the country, like opposition figures from Belarus. Keep a thought out. If you know anyone from that country, please reach out to them. Make sure they're okay, because if they don't get support from Westerners, from others around the world who support Ukraine and all other countries against Russian imperialism, then we will end up with another Belarus, basically, with a second Belarus in the Caucasus, bordering Armenia and Turkey. We'll end up with another Russian puppet state. So, please do not forget about them, the Georgian people and their struggle. Next, let's go back to the war map. Let's see, how do I want to do this? Oh! Also, Deep State Map is no longer using, Wait, are they no longer using Buy Me a Coffee? No, they are still using Buy Me a Coffee. Interesting. Quick question, chat. Several of you might know, especially if any of you are Ukrainian or have been in Ukraine or own Ukrainian bank accounts, does Buy Me a Coffee still not work for any Ukrainian accounts? Has that officially been completely cut off? If you happen to know, then tell me in the comments. Ozzy Bugga says Georgian protesters are very active on Blue Sky. Georgian students are still protesting heavily. Good. It might take longer than 3 months. It might take as long as half a year of protest and real, beyond just protesters, real leadership with political, economic, and it doesn't necessarily have to escalate to a civil war, but some, law enforcement and military backgrounds. Because really, I think that's part of. I should ask someone who's very, very well versed in Ukrainian history, because I don't pretend to be a complete expert on the matter by any means. But when Ukrainians were protesting in the Revolution of Dignity in the Maidan, I mean, you had everyday protesters, but you also had um, people with political backgrounds. You had people who were former police officers. You had students. You had a wide array of people involved in those protests from many walks of life and backgrounds. So the longer the protests keep up, and the more people can be convinced to join, and that the Georgian Dream Party is not what's best for the future of Georgia, not just among students, but also among and supporters of Zorabichvili, but also among existing political establishment, other parties, and even the Georgian Dream Party itself, maybe, the better a chance there is that within the next what 2 to 5 months, hopefully there will be good news, and hopefully there will be real change that comes to Sakartvelo, Republic of Georgia. In any case, all right. Let's pull up this map. Let me take off the info cap. Let me connect with the window. Good. There we go. All right. Let's see. I want to take a look at a few things. Ukraine itself, but also... Oh, how far does this let me go? Dang. Should go all the way to Japan. It does. We do see here now that the map also it always included this, the contested territory between Japan and Russia, occupied by Russia, not returned to Japan since 1956, the Southern Kuril, which I believe actually have a different name in Japanese. But we also see that North Korea is marked as a location of importance, or at least the capital is, which lets us know that North Korea is pretty much, it obviously is officially recognized as a participant and an enemy of Ukraine in this war. So if we see more events pop up, or perhaps we'll actually see some more details be related, that are indirectly related to the war, pop up with markers here on the Korean Peninsula. Only time will tell. But there's plenty more to be focused on over here, directly on the battleground in Ukraine. And of course, Transnistria is right here. Ukraine has recently reiterated a pledge to be willing to help Moldova take care of the security situation in Transnistria and retake the territory under Moldovan control. Budapest, we see the clown here with Orban's pro-Russian regime. Hopefully, if Slovaks hold the line, we will see Slovakia remain without any markers and not end up falling into this same kind of clown show of a government that we see in Budapest. Let's get back over here, starting with the current situation in Kursk. So, as far as the situation in Kursk goes, Russians have been pushing to take back everything that Ukraine originally took in their surprise offensive, and it has been shrinking. But Ukraine always has something up its sleeve. Um, I know that there was another counteroffensive recently announced and launched in the Kursk region by Ukrainian troops. I think a big part of it has been to hold on to or shore up more of what Ukraine has been holding, rather than uh, take a whole lot more land. Because that's the thing, the strategy, the tactics Ukraine has to employ because they have less troops and less resources than the enemy, and other nations have not directly contributed combat troops to Ukraine, means that the element of surprise is crucial. So they're still holding, but of course, a lot of what they originally took has unfortunately been uh, taken by Russian forces with support from North Korean mercenaries, from North Korean troops. Um, I think there's still been some more, probing attacks in the Belgorod region, but Russia had been expecting and, you know, basically has these troops here to try to prevent a Kursk offensive from happening in Belgorod. It's also a little more difficult because if you look over here, Kursk in the Kursk Oblast, um, where is it? Right. Oh, yeah, Kursk itself, which is at the very least a major city, though I do believe the actual capital of Kursk, is pretty far away. And Ukraine, it was unexpected because Ukraine wouldn't actually be able to take Kursk. It was way too far, so Russia kind of neglected this, not thinking that Ukraine would actually go, forward and hold territory in what is a lot of it more rural, with the exception of the town of Sudza, I guess, more rural part of Russia. Um, in Belgorod, with the major city being much closer to the border, I think they had more paranoia and more foresight to try to shore that up, which is why they, you know, uh, tried to make this. The enemy tried to make this buffer zone right here. So Belgorod's a little more difficult. More counteroffensives in Kursk could happen to help force the Russians to uh, basically divert forces from elsewhere and not be able to just easily, you know, end this war on terms more favorable to Russia. Um, over here, before we get to the main front lines, here's Belarus. And Belarus, let's see. Bryansk, Homel, Minsk. As you can see, there are soldiers. There's an airfield here, places of concentration of illegal armed formations of the self-proclaimed Republic of Belarus. The Gomel Airport, or Homel, legal armed formation. Yeah, so you can see that Belarus has a few soldiers over here. Really, my my prediction, aside from fighting to hold the line and keep the Russian invasion as slow as possible and make them pay for every inch across the front line within Ukraine itself, rather than an attempt at a breakthrough in Belgorod, uh, at least near the capital. If there were to be a push, it would have to be somewhere over in this area that's more rural if they tried to hold, like with Kursk, another portion of Russia over here in Belgorod. Or it would make more sense over here in Bryansk, in some of these small villages and towns over in this area would logically make the most sense. Or somewhere along the border with Belarus, especially since, yeah, that would risk Belarus getting more directly involved, but also Lukashenko doesn't really want to be more directly involved. um, so the calculus for that is a little complex on Ukraine's part, but those are the two places I would say, Bryansk and Belarus, if they go for a surprise attack again at some point. And from the looks of this map, Bryansk would be supposedly the least prepared or least defended. It really would just create another situation of holding land to try to force Russia into better negotiation tactics. Better negotiations with Ukraine. Over here on the main front line, it still has been slow, but we have seen the enemy making progress over here. Let's see. Kupiansk is still holding. There hasn't been a siege yet on the city, but as you can see, we do see the enemy creeping closer and closer to it. It's, little by little, as time goes on, they're pushing to at least be able to put pressure on Kupiansk from the north, have fire control of this road, and then down here, I'd say the biggest threat would be, the biggest threat would probably be if they ever cross this bridge to Senkove, and I think from the looks of this, the bridge was blown, so as to make it more difficult for Russian troops to be able to cross over and then get behind Kupiansk and attack it more easily from the south because of these natural river barriers. So it's not good that they're past these natural barriers on the north, but they still have to creep their way down southward. And that doesn't even give them a full surrounding of the city, and there still would be supplies that could come through this main road from Shevenkove to Kupiansk. But this right here does make it so that anything from down south, like Borova or any bases that Ukrainians might have here down south, that's cut off. The bridge is blown. You can't get supplies up from down this way. You could only do it from any forward bases that are down here, if there are any established, on this portion of road down near Osinovo and Pristin, or from the west. Or I guess, yeah, that's basically it, because the north is slowly seeing encroachment from the west and maybe from the south, but more realistically, mostly just from the west. But Kupiansk is holding. Down south, more and more, we are seeing, very slowly, little by little, but still, Russian forces pushing toward these other borders. So they're getting closer and closer to a situation where they could have fire control and surround Pokrovsk, and then try to head south more into the next oblast over. But it's still very slow. And, I mean, let's, just as just to take a look, let's go back. So what's this? This is January 10th, 2025. Let's go back 3 months to October 1st, 2024. So in 3 months' time, let's see, Pokrovsk, Velika Novosilka, Kurakove. They have managed to take Kurakove and get to where they're surrounding and getting around Velika Novosilka. But yeah, again, still quite slow. And all of this over here, if I'm not mistaken, we have Luhansk, we have Donetsk, and then beyond that, we get over here to these oblasts, this one over here that Dnipro is a part of. The next huge, like really, really major city is Dnipro. And at the rate that they're going, Russians aren't going to get to Zaporizhia or Dnipro anytime soon, going from east to west. So I'd say that a big part of this is probably just to try to fill in as much of it really is just them trying to fill in as much of Donetsk as they can, so that they can claim that the majority of the Donbass has been brought under Russian control. And there's still a huge portion of it that has yet that it like this would take a long time. In fact, not just 3 months. Let's take a look. What did this front line look like back in? Let's look at January of 2023. Okay, so that's January of 2023. Then January of 2024, January 1st. That's 1 year worth, like 365 days. 1 year worth of pushing. And then let's go to January 2025. 1 more year. So between 2023 to 2024, it was very, very slow. Between 2024 to 2025, it did speed up in terms of the amount of land mass occupied by a fairly large amount. But still, it's at that rate. It's going to take a long time before you would see Russia going all the way across to Kramatorsk or Sloviansk or Izium. And they're never going to reach Dnipro. It's still a very slow process. But Ukraine has weary troops. Russia has meat grinder tactics. Aside from equipment, Ukraine really, really needs manpower relief. So if that's not going to happen, then I've said it before, I'll say it again. I really don't want to see another generation of Ukrainians in a war in the future. But the way things are going, it does look like at some point, at an indeterminate future time, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years. 50 years is a long time, guys. 100 years. But at some point when this war officially ends, it's going to shift from a hot war to a cold war status. And when that happens, the war will continue in the form of espionage and infiltration of Ukrainian society by by Russians, of Russian society by Ukrainians. Um, it'll be like Saudi Arabia versus Iran. And then at some point, likely would end up becoming a hot war again. Um, I really don't want to see that happen. I know that no one here wants to see that happen either. Um, so again, I call on Western nations and governments to do more to prepare to help Ukraine minimize, uh, to push back and take back more land, not just hold the line the best that they can, and to prepare because we can help Ukraine right now in this war, and we can help Ukraine in preparing for the next one. Those are the two things that we can do. But yeah, it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot for the next couple of years, guys. And I'm all in. I'm here to help Ukraine however I can with what little I can as a single person. But, together, we band together, we will achieve great things and make sure that Ukraine remains sovereign, democratic, free, and capable of liberating all of their land. All right. So that was a lot. Sorry if I was rambling a bit. But let's go ahead and take a look at the chat because I've just kind of been going over the map for a minute. Oh, hey, Claire. And Hugh G is here. And Andrew Perrotua said Kursk's main motivation was to prevent a planned attack on Sumy by Russia. Yeah, I could see that. Well, I mean, it's a twofold thing, really. It's a preemptive strike. Oh, shoot. Hold on. Laptop battery. One sec, I'll be right back. Okay, and I'm back. But yeah, no, that doesn't surprise me in the slightest. Because you don't want to have another front open where you are on the defensive and incapable of holding the line. So, preventing a planned attack on Sumy, that makes sense. But also, it does create a Ukrainian buffer zone, which is important. Like the fighting in Kursk. Excuse me. The fighting in Kursk probably did prevent an invasion because it went both ways, Like an area that no one's really paying much attention to that just seems like no man's land. Not always, but in some scenarios, from both sides of a war, of a conflict, that's an opportunity for either side to launch a surprise attack. So it it probably did do exactly that, prevent a Russian invasion preemptively of Sumy, but also create, buy time, make it so that the Russians had to shift their strategy, shift their plans, start pushing to get Ukrainian troops out of Kursk. And what I said before, from 2023 to 2024 being very slow, but from 2024 to 2025, the gains being more rapid, even if it is still slow, being larger gains for the enemy, for the Russian side, on the front line in the east. um, if there weren't Ukrainian troops in Kursk from a preemptive strike, then the rate at which more and more of the eastern front line would be turning red, it would be even faster. It probably would be even faster. So, yeah. With that being said, Belarus is very unlikely to try to launch an attack on Ukraine. And Bryansk, well, we'll see what happens with Bryansk. It really just comes down to what resources Ukraine can muster and if they could do another surprise attack like they did in Kursk. Yeah, time will tell. Time will tell. All right, let's see what else. Michael says, Buy Me a Coffee is no longer supporting withdrawals to Ukrainian bank cards due to sanctions and liability. Buy Me a Coffee also discontinued support for Payoneer, a payment system available in Ukraine. However, I don't see the rest of that after the however got cut off. Okay. All right. So we're already 2 hours into the stream. All right. Oh shoot. Wow, I lost track of time. Okay. Here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna make my donation. So if anyone would like to join me, feel free to wait. Do I not have the? Oh, I don't. I don't have the. Dang it! Hold on. Where? Hmm. Wait a. Yeah, I do. Do I not have? Hmm. I hadn't been paying attention, but I guess those pop-ups I usually have um, for donating over PayPal haven't actually been showing up on the screen, which annoys me a little bit at myself because I thought I had those popping up periodically, but apparently not. But either way, link to be able to donate over PayPal is in the description. Should be in the description. And I'm going to go ahead and make a donation over PayPal right now. All right. And then I'm going to hop over to the shills, most likely. Hey, Claire. Good to see you. Hope all is well. Okay. Okay, and that's been sent. All right. What else? This is turned on, so hold on. Is this just covered by something else? No, it's at the top. Okay, this is going to annoy me. Okay. Well, that seems like a bug I'll have to figure out later off stream. All right. Well, for now, we'll call that good. Thanks for coming here, everybody. Thanks for listening to me ramble on a little bit. Continue to support Ukraine. Continue to support soldiers, civilians, um, anything that helps Ukraine during this war, helps civilians, those who want to live in peace, uh, in a free Ukraine, uh, recover from the horrors of all this, and anything that will help Ukraine in general as a nation, as well as militarily uh, in the future once this war is over. Because, as I've said before, even when the war is over, um, well, even when the war is over, a new war is going to start. So, thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting Ukraine. And Slava Ukraini. Oh, hey, James is here. Hey, James. I'm about to hop over to another stream. Don't know if you're going to be on today, but if so, I'll see you in a minute. All right. Bye, everybody.